Before we begin, find a quiet, cozy place. Let your body rest. Let your eyes grow soft and heavy. There's no need to hold on to the day now. You've done enough. You are enough. Let go, just a little more with each breath. Breathe in calm. Breathe out everything else. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw relax. Let your hands become warm and still. Feel the blanket across your skin, or the coolness of the air around you. Let it hold you like a lullaby. And now, as your body settles into softness and your mind begins to drift, our story tonight sets sail by the edge of a sleepy river. The water there is dark and smooth, barely moving, just enough to catch moonlight and carry it gently downstream. There are trees that lean over the banks. Old, knotted willow trees with branches that sigh when the wind passes through them. And beneath their silver shadows stands a small stone cottage. Its windows glow with a honey-colored light. The chimney smokes in soft, spiraling ribbons. And inside, a baker is awake. Her name is Anselma. And she does not bake like the others in the village. No, she bakes at night when everything else has gone still. When the moon is high and the stars blink slowly like sleepy eyes, Anselma's table is wide and worn with age, its corners rounded by time, its surface dusted always with the memory of flour. Tonight, her hands are already at work. In one wooden bowl is warm spring water. In another, crushed violet petals, gathered the morning before. Their scent is soft, earthy, and floral like a garden remembering the rain. She hums a tune under her breath, nothing loud, just a whisper of melody. The kind of tune that has no beginning and no end. The kind that follows the shape of breath. She pours the violet powder into the bowl, and the water blooms, a soft, dusky purple, swirling like ink in a dream. Next comes flour, then a touch of honey, thick and slow, a pinch of salt, a thumbprint of yeast, and then her hands. She folds and presses and folds. The dough forms under her palms like a sleeping creature, warm, alive, patient. Outside the window, the river keeps flowing, the moon keeps glowing, and inside the cottage, the only sounds are the quiet kneading of bread, the creak of wooden floorboards, and the soft exhale of the fire behind her. There is no hurry, there never is here, and with every motion Anselma makes, with every breath she takes, you too can begin to feel the rhythm of rest beginning to bloom inside you. Softly, gently, surely, you are already drifting. You are already home. Anselma lifts the dough from the bowl. It's warm now, holding the faintest tint of lavender blue, just enough to make you wonder if the color is real, or only something the moonlight placed there while you blinked. She dusts the wooden table with flour, slowly, carefully, as though she's painting peace across the grain. Then she begins to knead once more, pressing the dough outward, gathering it back, folding it inward. There's a rhythm to it, like waves on the shore, like your breath in and out, like a lullaby spoken without words. Outside, an owl hoots softly, a gentle, questioning sound from deep within the trees. Anselma doesn't answer. She only smiles, as though she understands something the owl already knows. She sprinkles in a dusting of sage sugar, an old secret in her recipe, passed down from her great aunt who swore that sage kept dreams from drifting too far away. As she folds the herbs into the dough, the scent rises into the air, sweet and earthy, tinged with sleep, and now she lets the dough rest. She places it in a shallow clay bowl, wraps it in a cloth stitched with tiny blue flowers, and leaves it near the hearth. The fire crackles, not loudly, but enough to fill the space with a soft, whispering warmth. It's the kind of sound you don't listen to, you feel it. It wraps around your thoughts, it settles your breath. It rocks you gently, like the wind swaying the branches outside. Anselma sits back in her chair, an old rocking chair carved by her father, its arms worn smooth by time. She leans back, lets her hands fall to her lap, and closes her eyes, not to sleep, not yet, but to wait. Because the dough will rise on its own now, and she has learned the wisdom of stillness. From the shelf behind her, a small glass wind chime rings once, softly, a single note that hangs in the air like a sigh just before sleep. The house smells of violet, sage, and wood smoke. The kind of smells that make you forget where one moment ends and another begins. And you, too, you can feel it now. That warmth, that hush, that sense that the world has grown very quiet and very kind. There is nowhere to go, nothing to be. Just the rise of dough, and the rise of breath, and the blue bread, not yet baked, but already full of dreams. Time passes slowly here, not like in the busy day where clocks tick and footsteps hurry. No, in Selma's kitchen, time moves like honey sliding from a spoon, slow, sweet, unhurried. The dough begins to rise, its surface plumping and smoothing, as though it too has fallen into a quiet dream. And in that stillness, as the fire sighs, as the wind brushes against the shutters, and Selma begins her nightly ritual, she opens the small wooden drawer beneath the windowsill, the one with a velvet lining and a scent like cedar. Inside, she keeps her dreams. Not dreams written on paper, not ones she tells aloud, but dreams captured in small tokens like pressed flowers, dried herbs, tiny carved moons, and faded scraps of ribbon once tied to birthday cakes long ago. Each one holds a memory, each one holds a feeling. And each time she bakes the blue bread, and Selma chooses just one small, quiet thing to place beside the loaf as it bakes, a kind of blessing, a soft wish folded into the air. Tonight, she chooses a blue glass marble, its surface swirled with silver, like a miniature night sky. She places it on the mantle, just above the oven, so that as the bread bakes, its dreams will float upward and outward and into the hearts of those who sleep nearby. Back at the hearth, the dough is ready. It has risen gently and fully, and now holds the faintest shimmer of blue that dances when the fire flickers. And Selma handles it with care, lifting it into a round clay baking pot lined with smooth oak leaves, the old kind used by her grandmother, to keep the bottom from burning and the dreams from sticking. She scores the top with a pattern of 3 crescent moons, the same shape carved into the beams of her home, meant to call in peaceful rest and protect all who sleep under their arch. The oven door creaks as it opens, and the heat rolls out like a warm breath. She places the pot inside, slowly, deliberately, and shuts the door with a quiet clunk. Then silence, not empty silence, but full glowing silence. The kind that settles in your bones and tells you everything is just as it should be. Outside, a breeze picks up, rustling the ivy along the cottage wall, nudging the wind chimes once again. The river hums, the fire crackles, and somewhere in the trees, a nightbird sings just once before settling in for sleep. And now, so do you. Like the dough resting before the bake, your body begins to soften, to grow lighter, warmer, still. You're safe here in the hush of the night, in the warmth of the baker's dream. And Selma returns to her chair. She sits, but she does not wait idly. She rocks slowly, not to pass time, but to feel it, to listen to the quiet music of the house. The chair creaks ever so faintly with each sway, like the sound of an old lullaby hummed under breath. She rests her hand on her lap, just above her apron, still dusted with violet flower, and in her other hand, she holds a small cup, a tea made from lemon balm and rose hips, steeped in water drawn from the river at dusk. She sips in silence, then closes her eyes and lets her thoughts float like leaves in the wind. Sometimes the villagers whisper about her bread. They say it holds secrets, that eating it gives you dreams not your own. Dreams of places you've never seen or people you've never met, and yet somehow feel like home. Some are frightened by this, others grateful. But Anselma never explains. She knows dreams aren't meant to be understood, only honored. That's why she bakes the way she does, in silence. With herbs and flowers, with slow hands and a still heart. Because in the world of dreams, you must move softly or they scatter like smoke. She sets her cup aside. The tea is gone, but its warmth remains inside her. She leans her head back, eyes fluttering closed. Not quite sleeping, but not quite awake. The scent of baking fills the cottage now. Not sharp, not sweet, but smooth. Like velvet warmed in sunlight, the violet in the dough releases its perfume gently. The sage crackles faintly beneath the crust, and the air becomes thick with comfort, as though it too has turned to dough, rising, stretching, resting. Above the oven, the blue glass marble catches firelight. It glints once, then fades into shadow. Outside, the world leans into sleep. The river murmurs like a story too soft to hear. The stars blink slow and steady, each one watching over the roof of Anselma's home. Even the trees have stopped swaying, as if holding their breath for what comes next. And what comes next is the bread. Soon, it will be ready. Soon, the loaf will be lifted from its clay nest, its crust gently cracked, its center soft and blue-tinged, like twilight folded into warm hands. But not yet. Now is the moment just before. The moment when nothing happens, and yet everything is becoming. Let yourself rest here, in the quiet between rising and done, between day and dream, between the hush of flower and the hum of breath. You are exactly where you need to be. The minutes stretch like soft butter. They melt through the rafters and slip across the stone floor, pooling in the corners, settling into the spaces between heartbeats. Anselma opens her eyes slowly, not startled, not hurried, just aware. The air tells her it's time. She stands with care, her joints creaking just a little like the old wooden beams above her. She moves the way a river moves, steady, gentle, unshaken. The oven door groans as she opens it, and warmth spills out into the room, not fierce, but steady, like the golden exhale of something alive. Inside, the blue bread has risen perfectly. Its crust is firm and golden, scored moons baked deep into its skin. And beneath the surface, if you look very closely, you can still see the faintest hue of blue, a shimmer caught between shadow and glow. She lifts the loaf carefully with her thick wool mitts, places it on a carved wooden board, and carries it to the center of the table. The scent follows her. It's heavier now, sweeter, deeper, not like flowers in bloom, but like memories. Memories you forgot you had, soft-edged and slow. She sets the bread down and lets it rest, because even bread, even dreams, need time to cool. And as it cools, she takes out a small knife, not to slice, not yet, but to trace the moons on the crust, one by one. A soft meditation, a blessing. She closes her eyes again and whispers something. Not a spell, not a prayer, just words folded in love. A wish for whoever eats the bread, a wish for dreams that don't vanish on waking, a wish for rest that lingers. When she finally does cut the first piece, the sound is tender. A quiet crackle as the crust gives way, followed by the hush of steam escaping from the center. The inside is soft, moist, warm, and touched with that impossible hue, that moonlit blue, that dream-dyed blue. She places the slice on a small wooden plate, lined with dried rose petals, and she sets it on the windowsill, not for herself, but for whatever spirit, whatever wandering soul might pass by and meet it. Because bread like this is meant to be shared. Outside, the river hums a little louder, as if in thanks. A breeze stirs the ivy. The wind chime rings once. And the stars, oh, the stars. They seem to blink just a bit slower now, as if even the sky is drifting to sleep. And you, dear listener, so are you. With each breath, a little softer, a little deeper, a little more at ease. You are floating. in a house that smells of bread and violets. You are being carried on warm air and old songs. You are resting in the pause between one dream and the next. The loaf now rests, its crust cooled to a perfect softness, not crisp like daytime bread, but yielding, comforting, as though it had been shaped by lullabies, not hands. And Selma stands still beside the table, watching the steam curl and vanish, like thoughts at the edge of waking. She doesn't eat the bread. Not tonight. Not yet. This loaf is not meant for hunger. It's meant for sleep, and so she wraps the rest of it in linen, a cloth dyed with elderberry and stitched with tiny blue stars. She places the bundle inside a wicker basket lined with moss, soft as lamb's wool, and sprigs of dried thyme tucked in each corner. Then, with no shoes, just woolen socks on quiet feet, she lifts the basket and steps out into the cool night. The door closes behind her with a hush, as if even the hinges know not to disturb the moment. The stars above are scattered like breadcrumbs, tiny crumbs of light across velvet dark. The moon is high, round, and silver, watching. The grass is damp under her feet, and the earth gives a little with each step. The path winds gently toward the heart of the village, just a handful of houses tucked around a square, all asleep, all dreaming. Anselma walks without hurry. She knows each step, each tree, each stone. She stops before a house, small, round-roofed, with lavender in the window box. She opens the gate with a soft creak, walks up the path, and places the basket on the doorstep. There's no note, no knock, just the bread, and a single blue feather she tucks beneath the cloth found earlier that day by the riverbank. It is enough. She turns. She walks back the way she came, one house, each night, just one, and always when the blue bread is made. Back at the cottage, she removes her socks and hangs them by the hearth. She pours the last of her tea, cool now, but fragrant still. She takes her book, the one with pages made of pressed linen and a leather cover edged with ivy, and she opens to the next blank page. With a quill dipped in violet ink, she writes only this: blue bread, midsummer moon, gifted. Then she closes the book, sets it aside, and lets her head rest back against the chair. The fire has faded to embers. The room glows with orange breath. The bread is gone. The stars still shimmer, and you are nearly asleep, floating between breath and dream, held like the loaf in a place of warmth and care and quiet. You're not quite in the story anymore, but it is still holding you, just as the moon holds the river and the baker holds the night. The embers glow softly, breathing the last warmth of the day into the room. Their light flickers across the wooden walls, painting them in gentle shades of golden shadow. And Selma stays in her chair, her hands resting loosely in her lap. She does not need to rush. The night is kind. It allows her to move slowly. Her eyes close, but she is not asleep. Not yet. She simply listens. To the faint rustle of the ivy along the cottage wall, to the quiet knock of a branch against the window, to the fire's slow heartbeat. She feels the weight of the day falling away, like flour dust drifting to the floor, each thought loosening, softening until her mind is light and clear. A soft breeze pushes through the cracks in the window frame, bringing with it the scent of the river. Cool, mineral, and faintly sweet. She inhales deeply. It feels like breathing in sleep itself, then a sound, a gentle one. A tiny flutter at the door, and Selma rises. She steps softly across the room, her bare feet silent against the stone floor, and opens the door just a crack. There, on the step, is a small bundle of lavender tied with twine, freshly cut, still fragrant. She knows who left it. The same child who will wake tomorrow to find the blue bread on their doorstep. No words exchanged, just gifts. Quiet kindness passed back and forth like warm loaves, like shared dreams. And Selma picks up the lavender, presses it gently to her chest, and carries it inside. She places it on the table beside the small blue glass marble from earlier. For a moment, she lets her fingers rest on both, feeling the cool smoothness of glass and the soft dryness of the flowers. A reminder of why she bakes, of what it means. Not for recognition, not for thanks, but because everyone deserves dreams that are soft and safe, even if they never know who sent them. Anselma turns back to the fire, but the embers are nearly gone. The room has cooled, wrapped in the hush of night. She pulls the quilt from the back of her chair, patchworked with scraps of old aprons and sheets, and drapes it over her shoulders. The weight of it is comforting. It smells faintly of lavender and wood smoke. It feels like memory, like home. She sits again in the rocking chair. The lavender bundle rests on her lap now, and she lets her fingertips brush each purple bud, counting softly. With no need to reach an end, the rhythm lulls her. The hush holds her, and as her head tilts forward and her breath slows, you too can feel yourself surrendering to sleep, softly, completely, without fear. At the center of the village, where 4 cobbled paths meet under the arms of an old elm, stands the baker's shop. By day, it bustles, wooden door always open, laughter floating through the scent of flour and flame. But by night, it is still. Its shutters closed with care, lanterns turned low, a bundle of herbs tied above the lintel meant for clear dreaming, bay for safety, lavender for peace. Inside, the hearth glows dimly, not out, never out, but soft as breath, casting warm shadows across worn stone and wood-smooth surfaces. The baker rests now, not in a bed, but in a chair by the oven, one hand cradled against the curve of her cheek, head tilted ever so slightly, a contented line at the edge of her mouth, as if she's still shaping dough in some gentle dream. Beside her on the table lies a leather-bound notebook, old and faded, its corners softened by time and touch. It holds no recipes in the way you'd expect. No precise weights, no stern instructions, no secrets written in ink. Instead, small drawings, pressed petals, moon phases noted in charcoal, and quiet lines like, "Breads left to rise beneath violets turn out best when the river sings." Knead to the rhythm of the heart, not the clock. Blue bread dreams carry longer into morning. She learned these not from books, but from the one before her, and she before that, a lineage not of blood, but of bread. A sisterhood of night bakers who knew that the right crust can mend sorrow, that scent can guide a child safely through sleep, that crushed petals carry whispers the mind can't always hear, but the soul understands. And this night, with the stars stretched thin across the heavens like threads ready to be pulled, the baker has done her part. Dozens of loaves, each a little different, each with its own blue shade, some like cornflower, others like morning mist, a few almost silver, have been quietly delivered. Not sold, given, left in baskets at thresholds on windowsills. For new mothers, for those grieving, for the lonely, for the dreamers. Each loaf holds a note never signed, but always with words meant to comfort, for gentler dreams tonight, for memories that need soft edges, for sleep that returns. And in that moment, as she sleeps in her chair, the baker dreams not of fame nor fortune, but of the river shining moonlight into open windows, of the way warm hands press dough, not just to shape it, but to share something deeper, a gift passed quietly between night and dawn. And outside, beneath the rustling elm leaves, a fox pauses by the shop. She sniffs the air, tilts her head, and with paws nearly silent on stone, wanders off down a path scented with violets. Far beyond the village, in a hollow by the river where the reeds grow tall, a boy named Milo turns in his sleep. He does not know that his dreams tonight have been shaped by blue bread, but something in his chest feels lighter, less tangled, less afraid. Earlier that day, His shoulders had slumped with the weight of all the things he couldn't say, of the way his father looked at the sky more than at him, of the ache in his throat when his drawings were left unread. But tonight was different. When he'd returned from the forest with twigs and moss for his terrarium, he found a cloth-covered bundle waiting on the doorstep. The smell was like nothing he knew, sweet and floral, but not candy sweet. More like earth after rain or a field in late spring. And with it, a note to keep your dreams wild and kind. He had eaten it slowly, each bite dissolving like mist on his tongue. And then he had gone to bed without dread, without counting the cracks in the ceiling or tracing the sound of the wind and worry. Now, in sleep, he walks through a field of tall grass where giant butterflies lift him gently into the sky and colors spiral like stories he has not yet told. The bread is doing its work, not through magic, not in the way of spells or potions, but in the older way, the quieter one, where intention seeps into the grain, where love steeps like tea in warmth, and where memory becomes something tender instead of something sharp. In another home, an old woman lies curled beneath a heavy quilt. Her hands ache from the cold, and her husband has been gone for 3 winters now. But on her knitstand sits a slice of blue bread, warmed slightly and resting beside her reading glasses. She hadn't eaten it all at once. No, she had taken tiny bites and let each dissolve slowly on her tongue. It had reminded her of her wedding day, of violet ribbons in her hair, of laughter from behind flower-dusted curtains. She falls asleep, not thinking of what is missing, but of what once was and how it glowed. And further still, in a cottage just outside the woods, a midwife stirs in the night, a baby just born still sleeping on her chest. The mother, exhausted, rests in the next room. The midwife nibbles a piece of the gifted loaf, her eyes full of quiet gratitude. She feels herself soften, her pulse slow, and though she does not close her eyes, her breath becomes even, as if sleep touches her from the inside out. All around the village, small lives settle, each one unaware of the baker asleep in her chair, head tilted gently to one side, her fire dim but not gone. And above them all, the moon continues to shine soft and full, like a bread rising in the oven of the sky. In the morning, dew clung to the grass like whispered thoughts left behind in sleep. A gentle fog hugged the rooftops of the village, wrapping the chimneys and shutters in a silvery hush. Chickens clucked softly behind crooked fences. The river murmured secrets it had learned overnight, its waters reflecting a sky just beginning to bloom with dawn. And in the bakery, still warm from the breath of midnight, Anselma stirred. Her sleep had been light, the kind woven from snippets of memory and fading dreams. She sat slowly, fingers curling around the arms of her chair. Her apron was dusted with flour, and her braid had loosened in the night. The oven still radiated a faint warmth, like a hearth remembering the sun. She stood and stepped into the morning light that filtered through the glass, casting pale gold across the flour-dusted tiles. There was a peace in the quiet, the kind that grows when a task has been done, not for reward, but for love. Outside, children gathered, rubbing their eyes and peering up at her windows. They didn't always know what to say. They only knew that something about her bread made the world feel gentler. And Selma smiled, her eyes kind, her heart unhurried. She reached for her blue ceramic bowl, the one with the thumbprint dent from her grandmother's hands, and began preparing dough for the day. She didn't measure by numbers, she measured by feel, by the softness of flour, the humidity in the air, the memory in her fingertips. She crushed fresh violets with a mortar and pestle. The scent rose like a lullaby, not sweet like sugar, but sweet like silence, like forgotten lullabies, like the way a hand can rest on a back and say, "I'm here." She folded the petals into the dough, watching the faint tint swirl with the yeast. A hint of periwinkle began to blush through the mixture. The door creaked open behind her. A small voice spoke, "May I help today?" It was the boy Milo. His eyes were clearer now, like a sky rinsed clean after rain. He held his hands out, palms already dusted with flour from the early morning. Anselma looked at him, then at the sunlight spilling across the counter. She nodded, of course. Together they kneaded, their hands pushing and folding in rhythm. Neither spoke. There was no need. The dough responded with softness, stretching, yielding, remembering. Outside, the village began to stir. Baskets were placed on carts. Doors opened, dogs barked, a baby cried. But in that bakery, time slowed. Each breath was a thread in a longer tapestry. Each press of the dough a heartbeat in a story passed down not in words, but in the quiet ritual of bread. And on the windowsill, an oven bell sat silent, waiting for dusk to ring it softly into dream. As the morning grew brighter, the bakery doors creaked open. Warm air drifted out in a fragrant CGH cinnamon, crushed violets, and something that could only be described as ... comfort. Villagers trickled in with baskets hanging from their arms, their faces still holding the remnants of sleep. They didn't speak loudly. The bakery had always felt sacred in the early hours, like a chapel of warmth and dough. And Selma greeted each one with a gentle nod, a whispered good morning, and hands that never stopped moving. Milo, though small, moved with care. He dusted the counters, filled the little glass jars with lavender sugar, and carefully wrapped warm rolls in cloth. And Selma handed him a blue loaf. "Would you like to deliver this?" He looked at it, the soft hue catching the light like the wing of a dragonfly. He nodded. It was for old Marna, the seamstress who hadn't left her cottage in weeks. Milo walked down the lane slowly, the bread held to his chest like a letter full of secrets. As he passed under trees, petals fell onto his shoulders. A soft breeze stirred the river's edge. A bell rang in the distance, not loud, not urgent, just present. He knocked once at the cottage door, then twice. Inside, Marna opened the door, blinking as if the sunlight was unfamiliar. Milo didn't speak. He just held out the loaf. Her fingers, stiff with age and grief, closed around it. The moment was still, like watching something long lost find its way home again. She didn't cry, she didn't thank him. But the door stayed open just a little longer, and that was enough. Back in the bakery, Anselma rolled dough into delicate spirals. Each one tucked in upon itself, like a sleepy thought curling beneath blankets. She watched the sunlight climb the wall, inch by golden inch, until it touched the window ledge where a single feather lay. A dove feather, left from the dream the night before. She picked it up, turned it between her fingers. There were old stories about feathers appearing after true dreams. Dreams that meant something, dreams that would take root. She didn't question it. Not anymore. Instead, she tucked it behind a small frame hanging by the oven. Inside was a faded sketch, a woman with flour on her cheek and a laugh caught forever in her eyes. Her mother. Outside, children gathered once more, some to watch, some to help, some just to stand in the doorway and breathe it in. They said the scent of her bread made their dreams softer, made monsters in the dark quieter, made their fathers hum again and their sisters forget to be cruel. No one knew how it worked, but no one questioned it either. The village only knew that when Anselma baked her blue bread, the world, if only for a moment, felt like it remembered how to love. That night, something strange happened in the bakery. Not something loud, not something frightening, but something gentle, like a memory being remembered by the walls. Anselma sat by the window with her knitting, her hands slow, the yarn moving between her fingers like sleepy snakes. Milo stood at the counter, mixing a new dough, this one made from ground oats, crushed anise and violet water, aged for 7 days in a clay jug. And then, just as the moon crested above the chapel steeple, a light hum filled the room. It came not from the oven, nor the kettle, nor the walls, but from the dough itself, soft and warm and rising, the blue loaf had begun to hum, very faintly, a tune with no words, a lullaby that no one remembered learning. Milo looked up. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. And Selma nodded, but didn't stop knitting. "It's only singing when it knows you're listening." He leaned in closer, his breath fogging the cool night window. The hum shifted deeper now, almost like a purring cat. "Why does it do that?" he asked. And Selma finished a row of stitches and looked up at him, her eyes full of calm. "Because bread remembers. Flour keeps secrets, and dreams love to be sung to sleep." That night, they baked the loaf together, one kneading, one shaping, one brushing the crust with moon water, gathered from a silver bowl left out by the well. And when the oven finally sighed open and the bread emerged, glowing faintly, steaming like soft breath on a winter morning, they did not eat it. They simply placed it on the windowsill, facing the river, and watched. Hours passed. And sometime just before dawn, a single figure approached, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl, eyes closed as if walking in a dream. They didn't knock, they didn't speak. They simply reached for the blue loaf, held it close, and vanished into the violet mist. In the days that followed, more people came, not many, just one each night. A man who hadn't spoken in years, a child who painted only in shades of gray, a girl who wept each night in her sleep. They came not for food, but for something deeper. And in Selma, never asking names, never counting coins, baked and baked and baked. Each time the recipe was a little different. A pinch of thyme, a sliver of honeycomb, one golden petal from a rose grown beneath the chapel bell. And each time the oven sang, the village, once quiet and sleepy, began to feel like a story being told, not loudly, not quickly, but with warmth, and with care, and always with bread. In that riverside village, dreams became food, and food became comfort, and the baker's window glowed a little brighter each night, not from lanterns, but from bread that remembered what the world had forgotten. Morning came, but the sky had forgotten gold. It was the kind of dawn that came quietly, wrapped in a blanket of fog, with no birdsong, just the steady breath of the river against the stone walls. Inside the bakery, the warmth hadn't left. Even though the coals had cooled and Anselma still lay beneath her woven quilt, the room felt full, not with people, not with noise, but with presence. On the table, last night's violet loaf sat untouched. Not because it was forgotten, but because it was meant to wait. Some breads were for hunger, others were for healing. Outside, a gentle knock brushed the door. Twice, then silence. Anselma stirred, but did not wake. The knock came again, barely louder than a sigh. Milo, already awake, padded barefoot to the door and opened it slowly. A woman stood there, elderly, wrapped in wool the color of fading leaves. Her hands were knotted like twisted roots, but her eyes, they held stars. "I came," she whispered, "for the bread of blue." Milo didn't speak. He simply stepped aside as if he'd been expecting her. The woman crossed the threshold without sound. She moved like memory half there, half elsewhere. She approached the loaf, her fingers hovering but not yet touching. "The last time I had this," she said softly, "I was a girl of 12. My mother gave it to me before I left for the convent." Her breath shook. "I dreamed of lavender fields for 3 nights. I hadn't cried since, not until I smelled this again." Her voice cracked open like the crust of the bread itself. Milo placed a cloth around the loaf and lifted it, careful as a priest handling relics. The woman placed 2 silver coins on the table, one newer, one with the face worn nearly blank. "For the dreams," she said, "not the bread." Milo nodded. I think she'd agree. As the door closed behind the visitor, the bakery settled once again. And Selma, now stirring beneath her quilt, whispered into the pillow, Did she come? Milo nodded. And even though she couldn't see him, she smiled. By mid-morning, the mist had lifted. Only dew clung to the windows. And in the oven, a new loaf began to rise, this time with crushed mint and starflower. Milo pressed his ear to the oven door. It's humming again, he whispered. And Selma, standing nearby with a bowl of seeds in her hands, nodded. They always do, she replied, when the bread remembers who it's for. Far beyond the bakery, the woman walked back toward the edge of the river, her loaf wrapped like a gift to the past. She didn't eat it right away. She carried it until the moon rose. And when she finally broke it open beneath the trees, the blue glow touched her hands, and the dreams, soft as breath, returned. That night, something strange happened in the bakery. Not something loud, not something frightening, but something gentle, like a memory being remembered by the walls. And Selma sat by the window with her knitting, her hands slow, the yarn moving between her fingers like sleepy snakes. Milo stood at the counter, mixing a new dough, this one made from ground oats, crushed anise and violet water, aged for 7 days in a clay jug. And then, just as the moon crested above the chapel steeple, a light hum filled the room. It came not from the oven, nor the kettle, nor the walls, but from the dough itself. Soft and warm and rising, the blue loaf had begun to hum. Very faintly. A tune with no words. A lullaby that no one remembered learning. Milo looked up. Do you hear it? He whispered. And Selma nodded, but didn't stop knitting. It's only singing when it knows you're listening. He leaned in closer, his breath fogging the cool night window. The hum shifted deeper now, almost like a purring cat. Why does it do that? He asked. And Selma finished a row of stitches and looked up at him, her eyes full of calm. Because bread remembers. Flour keeps secrets, and dreams love to be sung to sleep. That night, they baked the loaf together, one kneading, one shaping, one brushing the crust with moon water, gathered from a silver bowl left out by the well. And when the oven finally sighed open and the bread emerged, glowing faintly, steaming like soft breath on a winter morning, they did not eat it. They simply placed it on the windowsill, facing the river, and watched. Hours passed. And sometime just before dawn, a single figure approached, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl, eyes closed as if walking in a dream. They didn't knock, they didn't speak, they simply reached for the blue loaf, held it close, and vanished into the violet mist. In the days that followed, more people came, not many, just one each night. A man who hadn't spoken in years, a child who painted only in shades of gray, a girl who wept each night in her sleep. They came not for food, but for something deeper. And in Selma, never asking names, never counting coins, baked and baked and baked. Each time the recipe was a little different. A pinch of thyme, a sliver of honeycomb, one golden petal from a rose grown beneath the chapel bell. And each time the oven sang, the village, once quiet and sleepy, began to feel like a story being told, not loudly, not quickly, but with warmth, and with care, and always with bread. In that riverside village, dreams became food, and food became comfort, and the baker's window glowed a little brighter each night, not from lanterns, but from bread that remembered what the world had forgotten. One morning, before the stars had fully vanished from the sky, a letter arrived. There was no knock at the door, no footsteps, only a breeze through the bakery window and the faint rustle of parchment on the countertop. Milo found it, folded neatly beside the spice rack. The paper was old handmade, pressed with faint specks of lavender and dried rosemary leaves. It smelled like wood smoke and garden soil, like something written long ago but meant for now. He opened it with careful fingers. To the one who bakes the color of dreams, The recipe has remembered you. The path is waking. If you wish to understand, follow the scent of warm wheat to the hill where owls gather. Bring no bread, only silence. There was no signature, no seal, just the faint imprint of a fingerprint and blue flower. He turned to Anselma, who had been watching from her chair with a knowing smile. "You're ready," she said softly.
"You just don't know for what?"
So that evening, just as the village fell into its gentle dusk, Milo packed a small satchel, only a flask of violet water, a silver thread, and a tiny bell with no clapper. He left behind his apron, his tools, and even his shoes. The path to the Owl Hill wasn't on any map. It couldn't be drawn, only followed. He walked where the wheat smelled strongest, where the river's mist curled thickest, and where the stars dipped closest to the earth. With each step, the world grew quieter. No rustling, no footsteps, not even the sound of breath. It was as if the land had decided to hold its voice, to let him hear his own heartbeat more clearly. When he reached the hilltop, it was empty, but the moment he stood still, the owls arrived, not all at once, first one, then another, then dozens silent, snowy, amber-eyed. They circled him slowly, not with menace, but with memory. And then, from between their feathers, something shimmered. A woman stepped forward, neither young nor old, cloaked in twilight, her hands dusted with flour and starlight. She spoke, not with lips, but with thought. "You've kneaded what was forgotten, you've baked what needed singing. Now, you must eat what you do not yet understand." She handed him a small crust of bread blue as a summer dusk, soft as sleep, still warm from no oven he knew. He took it, bit, and swallowed. The world blurred. The stars rushed closer. And then he remembered, not who he was, but what he was made of. Not names, but echoes. He was flour from a time long gone. Yeast from a laughter once shared. Water from a dream not yet dreamt. He was a baker, not of bread, but of healing, of memory, of rest. Down below, the village ovens flickered, and Anselma's eyes closed smiled without needing to see. For bread remembers, and now so did he. When Milo awoke, the morning was pale with fog. He lay beneath the old elm near the village gate, a light crest of dew on his brow, and blue flour dusted faintly across his palms. The bread from the Owl Hill was gone, vanished without crumb or trace. But something in him had shifted. He didn't feel changed. He felt restored, as if a song he had been humming his whole life had finally returned to its beginning. He walked back to the village slowly, the stones beneath his feet humming faintly, as though the path itself remembered him. The people greeted him with familiar smiles, unaware of the night's passage or the mystery that had risen and passed like mist. They saw only their baker beloved, steady Milo returning with morning on his shoulders, but Anselma saw more. She was sweeping the steps when he returned. "You've been dusted," she said softly, nodding to the faint shimmer still clinging to his sleeves. Milo smiled. "I remember now." Her broom paused. "What do you remember?" "That dreams are fed the same way people are," he murmured. "And some hunger only blue bread can fill." Anselma's eyes misted. She set the broom aside and wrapped him in a quiet hug. They didn't speak again that morning. Instead, they returned to the bakery together, hand in hand, lighting the oven before the sun had properly climbed the sky. But something new had taken root in Milo's hands. When he shaped the dough, it hummed under his fingers. When he kneaded, he saw flashes, not visions exactly, but feelings. Memories he could not name, belonging to people he had never met. A weaver's sorrow, a sailor's lost kiss, a child's wish whispered into a poppy field. And each time, the dough accepted it, absorbed it, and grew lighter in the bowl. The first loaves that came from the oven that morning were simple, no blue yet, no violets, but they carried with them a hush. When the villagers bit into them, they paused. Some blinked back tears they couldn't explain. Others smiled as if remembering something too distant to name. And one little boy laughed for no reason at all. Milo watched from the bakery window, chest warm, heart full. The flour was no longer just flour. The bread was no longer just bread. It was memory made soft. It was healing made warm. It was the dream of a baker made real in crust and crumb. And though the blue glow had yet to return, he knew it would. Not every night, not every loaf. But when the moon was right and the knead was quiet enough, the bakery would hum again. And someone, somewhere, would dream a little sweeter. The days passed with quiet rhythm. Milo baked, and Selma brewed her spiced teas, and the village dozed gently in the cradle of river and wood. The scent of rising dough drifted through the cobbled lanes, twining with rosemary and wood smoke. The violet petals, carefully dried and crushed into silken powder, rested in jars on the highest shelf. Milo didn't use them every day, only when the wind carried a certain hush through the shutters, or when a customer entered the bakery with shadows clinging quietly to their shoulders. On such days, the recipe would hum in his memory like a lullaby. His fingers would reach instinctively for the blue powder, and the dough would bloom with that gentle shimmer, soft as starlight, faint as a dream. He never explained the bread to customers. They never asked. But they always came back. Faces softer, eyes a little more open, sleep a little deeper, word spread. A traveler from a distant port arrived one evening, cloak smelling of salt and distance. He ordered a small loaf, wrapped it carefully in cloth, and said nothing more than, "For someone who's lost more than they can speak." A young woman came days later, wearing her wedding veil as a shawl, and took 2 rolls with trembling hands. She didn't smile, but when she left, her steps were less heavy. An older man, a blacksmith once, came after dusk, his hands knotted with age and regret. He didn't speak at all, just held the bread close, eyes misting, and pressed a small carved token into Milo's palm before vanishing into the night. And each time, Milo felt a quiet ache in his chest. Not sadness, something deeper, something shared. Each loaf carried not just flavor, but remembrance. Each bite, a thread in the great woven quilt of forgotten things. He kept a small book by the oven, now leather-bound and soot-kissed. In it, he wrote little notes beside the batches. Today the bread hummed like water. Crushed violets turned silver in the light. Dreamt of someone dancing alone. Heard a lullaby I don't remember learning. The entries were short, simple, but Anselma read them every night after the shutters were closed and the fire dimmed to embers. "It's like a baker's journal of dreams," she whispered once, her finger trailing over the ink. "No," Milo said softly, "it's a recipe still being written." Outside, the moon climbed higher. The blue bread glowed faintly on the windowsill, cooling beneath starlight. And somewhere in the village, a child stirred in sleep and smiled without knowing why. Because some stories, like bread, do not need to be told aloud. They're tasted, they're felt, and they're passed on, one dream at a time. Winter crept in gently, not with storms or sharp winds, but with a hush like a blanket of snow being laid across rooftops while no one was watching. The river slowed, its waters edged in delicate crystal. Trees bowed under the weight of frost, their branches glassy with stillness. In the village, lanterns were lit earlier each day, and Milo began lighting the bakery's hearth long before dawn. He didn't mind the cold. It made the warmth of baking even more sacred, even more like a spell cast against the silent white outside. The blue bread changed in winter. Violet petals, now harder to find, were carefully rationed. Milo mixed them with a hint of dried rosemary, and once on a particularly hushed morning, he added crushed snowberries and heard the dough sigh. It made a loaf so pale it looked like moonlight held in the palm. When he sliced into it, a soft steam lifted, carrying scents no one could quite name. A child said, "It smells like remembering." An elder whispered, "It smells like my mother's voice." And Anselma, She closed her eyes and said nothing at all, as though the aroma itself told a story only she could hear. Snow blanketed the world outside, but inside the bakery, the oven glowed with sleepy gold. Customers came in pairs now, bundled in scarves and shared silence. They bought bread without speaking, exchanging silver coins for something warmer than words. One evening, after everyone had gone, Milo stood alone, brushing flour from his hands. He looked out the frosted window, past the curling breath of the hearth, and saw the river, barely moving, barely dreaming, reflecting a sky thick with stars. He carried a loaf of blue bread wrapped carefully in cloth and stepped outside. The cold bit gently at his skin, but he walked on, boots crunching over fresh snow, down the narrow lane toward the bend where the river met the woods. There, under the sleeping branches of an old elm, stood a small stone marker. Time had softened its shape. Lichen clung to its base, but the name etched faintly across the face still caught in Milo's breath. He laid the bread at its foot, quietly, a gift, a thank you, a memory baked and offered back to time. And for a moment, the wind stirred, just so, and carried the scent of violets through the cold. He closed his eyes. The warmth from the loaf lingered in his hands. Some goodbyes don't need voices, some griefs are kneaded into silence, and some love, when true, glows faintly even in the deepest winter. Milo turned, footsteps already fading behind him, and walked back to the glowing oven that waited like a heart still beating in the dark. Icicles stretched like crystal teeth from rooftops. The river wore a coat of glass, and the trees forgot their leaves and leaned into the quiet. The village moved slower, wrapped in wool and candlelight. Milo, too, moved slower. His hands, though strong, began to ache on the colder mornings. He tied cloth around his knuckles and warmed them at the oven before touching the dough. His spine curved a little more. His voice, when he hummed in the early hours, was softer like the lullabies sung to coals before sleep. But the blue bread never faltered. Even as the violets became harder to source, even as days grew short and shadows stretched long, Milo's bread still glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, and the village, wrapped in frost, dreamed richly. Children slept more peacefully. Elders remembered things they had forgotten. Lovers, distant or grieving, found each other in their dreams again, tracing paths through imagined gardens where violet petals floated down like snow. They whispered thanks when they woke. They touched the pillow beside them and wept with gentle hearts. And Selma noticed it first. "Milo," she said one twilight, pressing her gloved hand against the fogged bakery window. "You're baking magic." He chuckled, the sound like a wooden drawer opening slowly. "No, just bread." But she only smiled and whispered, "Not anymore." That night, after the bakery had emptied and the coals had dimmed, Milo took out an old journal. The parchment was delicate and lined with flour-dusted sketches, diagrams of dough textures, notes about fermentation times, faded botanical inkings of violet petals. He turned the pages slowly, looking not for answers, but for memory, and on one page, tucked near the spine, he found it. A pressed violet, pale, preserved. Its edges curled, its color nearly gone. He touched it gently, it didn't crumble. And with a long, steady breath, Milo wrote something new. Not a recipe, but a story. A story of bread that glowed blue in moonlight, of crushed flowers in kneading hands, of hushes carried by rivers, of love that never spoiled, of dreams shaped by warmth. He left the book open beside the oven. He left the bakery door unlocked. And that night, as the snow fell soft as sugar, the dreams across the village grew deeper than ever before. A shared quiet like a blanket, and in every dream a fragrance lingered. Something like violets, something like hope, something like goodbye. The morning after that final snowy night, the bakery was quiet. No smoke curled from its chimney. No scent of crust or sweetness lingered in the air. Only a gentle frost coated the windows, and the village, still cloaked in dreaming, slept in. But when the sun rose barely a golden whisper over the riverbank, Anselma walked to the bakery. She wore a cloak too big for her, mittens stitched with patches, and a scarf the color of burnt cinnamon. Her boots crunched the snow as she stepped carefully toward the door, which she noticed for the first time in years was ajar. Inside, the warmth had faded, but not the feeling. The air still held traces of something fragrant, something blue, something quiet and kind. She stepped inside and called softly, "Milo?" No answer. The oven was cold, the baskets were empty, the shelves were tidy. The floor was swept, and beside the oven, resting open on the wooden counter, was the journal. Anselma approached it, heart trembling gently, not with fear, but something else. Reverence. She saw the pressed violet. She read the final entry. And she smiled. Outside, the snow-caught morning light, shimmering like sifted sugar. Word spread gently that Milo had gone. No one knew where. No footprints marked the snow. No cart tracks, no notes. But none of the villagers panicked. Because that night and the nights that followed, the dreams came again. More vivid, more tender. People dreamed of Milo, not as he had been in his last season, older and slower, but as he once was, younger, bright-eyed, flower on his cheeks and laughter on his lips. He stood in a field of violets that moved like a tide. He knelt to tie a child's bootlaces. He offered a warm loaf to a weeping stranger. He kissed a beloved hand no longer cold. And always when they awoke, the taste of the dream lingered. Blue bread, warmth, forgiveness, peace. Anselma, who became the new keeper of the bakery, never tried to bake the blue bread. She could have. She had the recipe. She had the notes. She had the flour and the violets. But she never did. Instead, she made ordinary loaves with extraordinary love. And that was enough. Each time someone asked her why the bread didn't glow, she'd smile and say softly, because that was Milo's dream. Mine is simply to feed the ones still waking. And in time, the story of the glowing bread became legend. A lullaby passed from baker to baker, a tale whispered to children under quilts, a memory kneaded gently into time. And every so often, on nights when the moon was high and the violets bloomed despite the frost, a faint glow would return to the oven stones, and no one would speak of it. They would only smile in their sleep and let themselves drift. Now, dear listener, let yourself drift too. Let the story settle around you like snowfall, soft, deep, and silent. Let the scent of blue bread guide your dreams. Let go. Sleep. Sleep well. Sleep full. Sleep blue.